Well then, what have we just witnessed? ESPN FC post-game segment. Mark Donaldson joined by Janusz Michallik. We will have Rob Dawson joining us from Spain very shortly. But for the third time in 5 seasons, Sevilla has knocked Manchester United out of Europe. And Janusz, a 3-0 victory for Sevilla in the second leg that's just finished. But I want to take it back to the 83rd minute of the first leg at Old Trafford 7 days ago. United were 2-0 up. They weren't cruising as much as they had been in the game, but how do you go from 2-0 up with 7 minutes of the first leg remaining to lose the tie 5-2 on aggregate?
Well, I mean, yeah, life happens, Mark, right? I mean,
quickly.
Two own goals. Look, I mean, I think, just to get it out of the way, it's obvious to say that, Manchester United probably lost that game at Old Trafford. I mean, they dominated. They should have won 3-4, maybe 5-0, who knows? In the end, it was 2-2. And I think everybody understood, given what has happened since, with the number of injuries and the sort of key players that were injured, that this wasn't going to be easy. I mean, Manchester United created their own perfect storm in those last few minutes in the first leg, and then you go into Sevilla, you see the intensity, you see that crowd, right? I mean, this this makes Old Trafford look like a church, when you saw that ahead of the game, and the intensity that the crowd in Sevilla brought in, and you say to yourself, look, one thing for sure, you can't concede early. You certainly can't concede early and in such a deflating way as we saw the mistake both from De Gea and Harry Maguire.
This competition is like the Sevilla Invitational. It is no surprise. They've won it 6 times. They, at home, are tough to beat. So it's no surprise that there's going to be noise. But United produced one of their worst displays of the season. What made them so bad tonight?
Well, I mean, first of all, their midfield was just overwhelmed with the intensity of Sevilla. I mean, you could see that. I mean, think about it. If you really, look at it, Casemiro, 2 suspensions. I know he's played a couple games since, but obviously it takes a little bit of time. Eriksen coming back, right? Sabitzer, a player that was withdrawn in the warm-ups in the game against Forest, right? I mean, certainly not the one that we saw in the first leg. And then, you look at somebody like Bruno, whom without this team, doesn't, I don't want to say can't function, but it doesn't function in the same way. That was questionable, of course, in the first leg, but he was suspended. And, if you look at the spine, since we've been talking about the spine of the team, you have to look at Lisandro Martinez and Varane. I mean, no team can kind of overcome that easily or as easy. By no means am I not taking, I'm not taking this away from Sevilla. As you said, they own this competition. I think everybody understood. It makes zero difference where Sevilla are in the table. They're getting better. They've had a horrendous start. I think they're up in the 13th and they played better. But you look at just the squad, you look at what they've done in this competition, you look how they play at home. And as I said, perfect storm. United just missing too many key players and overwhelmed immediately. And as I've said, I mean, every goal we can pick apart, right? And I'm sure we will here, Mark. But, the first goal like that, it takes, it just deflates you, as I said. It takes everything away. Then you kind of know it's just a downhill from there.
Let's analyse that first goal. Maguire is not Beckenbauer. But should he have, A, asked for it, and B, have been given? A lot of praise for Manchester United, the way they have defended at Old Trafford this season with the likes of Varane and Martinez. They're going to have to take the stick for this. Just because someone wants it doesn't mean someone should get it. But what's Maguire thinking with 3 players around him?
Well, first and foremost, and I want to be careful here because you know what happens here. He's one of those players right now that I mean, there's just everybody is just on him in his head, right? So I'm going to be as kind as I possibly can because I can only imagine the positions he's in. I mean, in terms of confidence, here's a player that was once the biggest transfer in terms of the defenders in the Premier League, right? Who's played for England and continues to play for England somehow, but who really is on the way out, hasn't played all that much, and has made number of mistakes. And just in this tie alone, obviously 2 massive mistakes. Or the first one, that header. I mean, I don't know what he should have done about that, right? But in any case, so I think he's playing under the pressure. He wanted the ball. First and foremost, the mistake is on him, right? Because he's got to be aware of his surroundings. There's 3 players collapsing on him. He's, with his back to the field. And that's where the second one comes in, because De Gea sees everything. So even though he's asking for that ball, I think if you're De Gea, you've got to think twice about that. Is this a good position? A, is this a player that you want to play it to, given that lack of confidence and lack of playing time? And three, or C, if you will, I mean, we all know that Maguires is not the most technical player in the world, because he isn't. He's not confident on the ball. That's why I think Ten Hag doesn't play him. That's why Ten Hag will eventually look for ways to get rid of him. So I think De Gea should have known better.
The whole game, the mistakes, the backup players playing, what did that tell you about Manchester United's strength in depth for Erik Ten Hag to choose from?
Well, again, I mean, the depth, I think it's there, but I mean, I've mentioned already some players, and you have Luke Shaw starting on the bench. You have Rashford, who's been injured as well. I mean, that's a big ask of any team. We've seen that with Liverpool. We see that with Chelsea from time to time. No matter what the name of the club is, when you have so many key players out of the lineup, or not 100%. Again, repeating the two center backs, you look at Zabitzer, who no chance looked like he was 100%. I mean, he came back, I don't know, maybe because I'm not so sure, but he didn't look himself. Certainly not the player that scored 2 goals in the first leg. No Bruno, and you go Garnacho, you go McTominay is not available. I just think against the quality of this competition, this late in this competition, at that particular stadium, against this team like Sevilla, I'm not sure if I should be sitting here and having this dig at United for lack of depth. I think the depth is there, but when you're missing 6, 7, or 8 key players, I think it just becomes difficult.
I mentioned that we'll be going live to Spain to speak to Rob Dawson, and as we bring him in, I want to read Rob's latest tweet on social media. After the game, Manchester United have had some shockers this season. Brighton, Brentford, Man City, Aston Villa, Liverpool, and Newcastle. You can add Sevilla to that list. Awful. Where in that list, Rob, are you putting that defeat tonight?
I mean, it's one of the worst. I mean, you can make excuses perhaps for some of those defeats. Particularly Man City. Obviously, Man City are a very good side. Liverpool, the game just disintegrated really in the second half. In terms of a performance from start to finish, from the first minute to the last, this is among the absolute worst that we've seen this season. It was very, very clear from the way that Sevilla started the game, the atmosphere, that United had to start very, very quickly. They had to be sharp on the ball. They had to take the heat out of the crowd, and they just did none of that. I don't like to be too critical of a team full of professionals, but they looked overawed by the atmosphere, and I know that's not the case, because you're talking about a team full of internationals who have been involved in games like this throughout their careers. But if you didn't know any better and you were looking to pick the team who were struggling domestically and sat mid-table in their own league, you certainly would have said that was Sevilla. United looked like the team who have had the poor season, and they just were never in the game. There wasn't even a 5-minute spell where you thought, oh, United are going to make something happen here and drag themselves back into it. They were absolutely dominated from start to finish.
Anthony Martial, Jadon Sancho, Christian Eriksen, and Antony. That's your front four, tasked with getting at least 1 goal against Sevilla. If that's on the team sheet and I'm Mendilibar or any of the Sevilla players, that's not frightening me at all. So why were they not more influential along with the rest of the teammates? Because as I've said to Janusz, this isn't new. The Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan is loud in Europe. Manchester United can cope with loud atmospheres. Or can they away from home?
Well, and that's the question. There is an argument that in the development of this team that they are just not capable of playing in this kind of a match. We said a minute ago that these are all international footballers. They should be used to this, but they are still a very, very fragile team, it looks like. And that's why, you mentioned the game at Liverpool earlier. That game doesn't finish 1 or 2-0. That game finishes 7-0. Mm-hmm. The game at City doesn't finish 1 or 2-0. It finishes 6-3. This game, they've not been edged out by a fortunate goal and lost 1-0, because this is football and that can happen. They've been absolutely battered and lost 3-0, and we're never close to getting through this tie. So, you can make an argument that this is still a very, very fragile team, and perhaps that's because we're still talking about a team who had a very chastening experience last season. They were absolutely awful last season. Erik ten Hag inherited a mess, and is slowly starting to change things and try and lift the level of the entire group. And maybe the confidence isn't as robust as perhaps we think it is. And when things go wrong or begin to go wrong, they unravel very, very quickly. And I think that's what we've seen tonight.
Rob, Janusz, sorry, 2 seconds. In the previous round, Manchester United went to the same city to face a better team who are higher up in the table in La Liga and were very comfortable. So what was the biggest difference?
I mean, that's something that only the players can answer. And I could point to that throughout the season. How can you go and beat Liverpool at Old Trafford, but then get smashed at Anfield? How can you beat Man City at Old Trafford and lose so heavily at the Etihad? How can you dominate Newcastle in a cup final, but then go to St James's Park and barely get a touch of the ball? This is a theme all the way through the season, and there's no real rhyme or reason. I mean, you have to remember that only a couple of weeks ago, United dumped out the best team in Spain in this competition in Barcelona. They went to the Nou Camp and went toe-to-toe with Barcelona and with a better team. They beat them at Old Trafford. They were worthy winners of that tie. And now a team who are 13th in La Liga have played well for the last 10 minutes at Old Trafford and their home game here and been worthy winners. United have had some fantastic results this season. They've played some great football in spells, but they've also had some absolute disastrous, not just results, but performances. And it's worse when it's the performance. You can forgive poor results, but there have been some absolutely abysmal performances. And only the players will be able to answer the question of why that is. Because it shouldn't be happening. These players are more than capable of coming to Seville and winning this game.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.